We continue our exit interview series, reviewing the past season for a trio of Heat players and look ahead to what's next. Will Victor Oladipo be back with the team? Can Omer Yurtseven finally become Miami's starting center? And can Dewayne Dedmon be a factor in the playoffs? We'll answer all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a late Monday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. Today's episode brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Wes, we're finally wrapping up our exit interview series, a special edition today, because as we're wrapping this up, we want to get to just one extra player. So not just a trio of players, but actually four players that we'll kind of be talking about, looking back at the past season, looking ahead to what's next. I think it's been a really fun exercise, a good way to kind of put a bow on the last season, but also looking ahead to the big questions that a lot of Heat fans are asking about this team.
Yeah, and we're going to start with Victor Oladipo because saving one of the bigger question marks for this offseason for the last episode here, because obviously he's a free agent, but moreover, kind of tough to get a read on Victor Oladipo. He only played 27 games across 2 years between the regular season and the playoffs for the Heat. And at times, definitely a helpful player for Miami. Other times, kind of trying to force his hand a little bit. I thought, he told me for a profile that I wrote about him that he still believed that he was that guy, referencing the fact that he was a two-time All-Star with the Indiana Pacers. And there were times during the Heat season, especially in the playoffs, where it felt like he was trying to prove that a little too much, and it would get him in trouble a little bit. So I think that there's things that you like from Victor Oladipo. Of course there is. And I do believe that there's still – I think there was a lot made about whether or not he had a role with the Heat and what his relationship with the front office was. My feel is that Victor Oladipo is still really happy with how the Heat treated him, allowed him to take his time with the rehab process, even though they were a little disappointed with how long it was taking this past season, and basically paid him to rehab. That's for 2 years. And I think there's still some goodwill there, and that Vic would like to make it work out in Miami. But we also know that he wants to be a starter. We also know that he's going to want to get paid, because he is a free agent. And there's a lot of factors there. But overall, I'm curious, what was your read after 27 games across the regular season and playoffs on Victor Oladipo, and can he still be that guy?
Yeah, I think that's a big question about Vic, is that we just haven't seen enough. I mean, Miami taking a prolonged approach, and I think that's where we've kind of settled on, right? That this was the team saying, look, we don't want to rush you back. And my understanding, and perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that Oladipo was eager to come back sooner, eager for the opportunity to play healthy a lot sooner than he actually wound up being, as in terms of when he actually got to see some game time action. But the Heat were taking that much more delayed, lengthy process of just letting him get back to as close to 100% as he's going to get. And having said that, he only wound up playing 8 regular season games. Of course, there was that final end of the season game against the Orlando Magic. Everybody points to where he had the big 40-point outing. That's all fine and good. We didn't really see that level of production matched at any other point. Keep in mind, again, he started that game against an inferior Magic team in the last game of the season because Jimmy Butler wasn't there. He did have his moments throughout the playoffs. He mostly shined defensively because, again, the offense just doesn't seem to be there. If that three-point shot isn't falling, he's quick enough to get to the basket, and I will give him that. And he did have some great moments getting to the line. He was able to initiate contact against the Boston Celtics, against the Philadelphia 76ers. He had his moments, certainly. But I think there's still too many questions about what's going to happen. So my overall takeaway from Victor Oladipo's season is that he can still be a good rotation player again. There was these I don't know exactly how to phrase it. There were a high expectations for Victor could do.
Yes.
Everybody expected this team to play so well because, they face adversity. They were able to get such strong performances out of Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, et cetera, to be able to withstand the loss of Bam Adebayo, Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler at various times. And then you're thinking, well, they're going to tie it all together. Plus, once Oladipo comes back, then all of a sudden you're going to have this exciting scorer, this great defensive player, a two-time All-Star, as you said before. That wasn't quite the case. So it was kind of unfair. And he didn't really have a clear role for him, too. So not only do we not know exactly what to expect out of Victor moving forward, I just don't know exactly how he fits on this current roster, because there does seem to be a duplicative nature to his game alongside what Jimmy can do.
Yeah.
And if, having said that, you're going to go to Jimmy. Jimmy's going to miss time at some point. That's fine. And yet I don't know that Victor's going to be – I don't know if he's going to be comfortable just kind of waiting and seeing. My big question as far as the offseason is concerned is, can he afford to bet on himself again? Because I think having – again, reiterating what you said, that he wants to be a starter. He wants to get paid. He lost out on so much money, but yet – I think he kind of needs to prove himself yet again, because we didn't really see enough of him over the last couple of seasons to get an accurate read on what kind of a player he can be. Can he afford to just sit out or wait one more year for his big payday, continue to prove the good soldier on this Heat roster, and then potentially cash in on a big deal next year?
Yeah. And can the Heat afford to let him walk away after, like I said, paying him to rehab for the better part of 2 years? And if you let him walk and just sign like a mid-level somewhere else, that's going to guarantee him a lot of playing time so that he can show out, maybe, stat pad a little bit in another contract year, where maybe that opportunity isn't exactly the same thing it is, right? Like, you have a contending team with the Heat. Would Vic want to go to Detroit or somewhere? I don't know. So name a bad team and just sort of show out for a season and kind of pad his stats and enter free agency again next year. Could be an option for him if it really comes down to the money for him. But do the Heat want to let him walk away after being this patient with him for a couple of years to let him go thrive somewhere else?
Yeah. Do you think they see it kind of an investment of time and money and resources? Okay.
I do, but and that's where my question is how badly do the Heat want Victor Oladipo back? Because they want him back. I think they do want him back, but every player has a price, and the Heat have some luxury tax concerns, and they have to ask that other question is, do we want to enter the luxury tax? We want to stay below that tax line. That's up to Mickey Arison and this front office to figure out and decide on. I think that they're not. If they do go, I think, again, my sense is that they're willing to get into the tax, but they don't want to go super far into it, right? They'll be willing to pay a moderate tax bill that they could potentially get out of at the trade deadline if the season kind of goes south for whatever reason. But with Vic, I would really strongly consider bringing him back. Number one, for all the things that we're talking about. You did invest some time here. It doesn't hurt to bring him back, even on a 1-year deal, a 1-year prove-it deal on both sides, to your point. Like, bet on yourself, man. Like, do you really want to take a 2-year deal worth $7-8 million a year if you think you could really show out in your full healthy season? Find a role now that you're going to be part of the training camp process, the pre-season process going into the regular season, because it was really hard to join the number 1 seed in the East on the fly the way that Oladipo did. And now that we're a little longer from, the end of the season, you kind of appreciate a little bit more what he was able to do at all, based on the circumstances. So I think that there's a lot on both sides, a lot of reasons to get a deal done. And if I'm the Heat, I would strongly consider paying over market for Victor Oladipo to make sure you get him back, even if you can't guarantee him a starting job or even significant, like, regular nightly minutes, knowing that in training camp, that's all that stuff is going to be determined at that point. But I would consider going over market at $10-15 million a year, just so that you also create that salary cap spot that now you have another tradable asset, whether or not you have Duncan Robinson next season or not, or maybe you move on from him over this summer, but whatever. Like, the Heat just don't have that many in-between contracts. It's all the $30 million Kyle Lowry deals or like the $2 million Max Strus deals and nothing really in between. And I think that there's something to be said about creating that salary cap spot on the roster, which now, because you have Victor Oladipo's bird rights, you can do.
You said the number before. I think you mentioned that ESPN's Bobby Marks had projected Oladipo's potential contract being
$7 to $10 million. Basically the mid-level exception. So it's $7 million for the taxpayer ones, $10 million for the non-taxpayer. So basically, I think what Bobby Marks is saying is that there's going to be a team with a mid-level exception available that could potentially offer Oladipo the role that he's looking for. Yeah. And that's probably what's going to be on the table. And for Vic, like you said, like, I think there is he's got that character that he's going to want to bet on himself for a year. I don't think he's going to necessarily look for a long-term deal unless, like, there's a surprise long-term deal that's available that comes out of nowhere. But I think that we're probably looking at like a 1-year deal for him.
That makes sense. I just also think some team might be willing. It's very difficult to get a gauge on this market and what the appeal of Oladipo would be. Did he show enough in these brief moments during the playoffs and regular season that some team with enough cap space that says, you know what, we want to take a chance. We want to bring Oladipo because we think he's the perfect complement, or he's the missing piece, or something
Yeah.
along those
You mean
lines.
going over the mid-level exception?
Yeah,
I don't see it because if you look at the teams with cap space, they're all young and rebuilding, and Vic just doesn't make sense even for those timelines.
no,
In
you're
when
right.
you know what I mean? Like, is Detroit, Oklahoma City, like they're gonna pull out all the Brinks trucks for Victor Oladipo? It doesn't really sound like that. That's why, like, again, that range probably falls into the mid-level exception because a team that is could view Victor Oladipo the way that you said, like the Heat viewed Victor Oladipo and fans viewed Vic over the like he's the X factor, swing factor, a guy who could get us over the hump in the playoffs. That's probably the type of team, whether it's the Heat or another one, that's looking at Victor Oladipo. Do you have a summer job for him or any other points
I do.
before we move on?
Before I
Okay.
get to that, I'm just going to say, do you have like odds that he returns to Heat uniform? I'd say there's a 70% chance that he comes back to Miami.
He comes back. I would go a little bit lower, like
Okay.
59%.
Oh, okay. Price is Right rules. All right. Yeah. A summer job. I mean, with Oladipo, also a twin there. You know, he has off-court interests, and the one that always stands out to me is his singing career. I know he's cut a couple albums. He was on the TV show The Masked Singer, which I have
Yes.
yet to see a single second of. But I did know he loves his singing, and to me, I think being a singing telegram delivery person, I guess I'm not sure exactly what the title would be, but door to door, Victor Oladipo going around his new adopted home of South Florida, singing about your first date, or whatever a singing telegram is all about. Congratulations, happy
Sure.
anniversary, etc. I like that idea. That's the
Okay.
one for me. What do you
He's
got?
personable enough to do it for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
in my profile, I did ask if he was the best singer in the locker room. I asked that to many of the Heat players and staffers that I interviewed for the story. All of them said
Mr. Eddie
yes.
Doubt,
All,
of
no,
course.
all of them said yes.
Yeah.
I've got him on Dancing with the Stars, actually, because the
Yeah.
singing is a big deal because he was on The Masked Singer. Why not do another reality show? Go on Dancing with the Stars, and Victor Oladipo, you want to be a star. You view
Mm.
yourself as a star. So go on Dancing with the Stars, win that one. We just saw Amon Shumpert win it. So the NBA floodgates are open now for the former players to win this thing. I want to see Oladipo on Dancing with the Stars. And he's a good dancer. Again, the singing gets all the praise for him because he was on that show. But if he goes on Dancing with the Stars, now you're a triple threat, right? Like you're an NBA player, dancer, and singer. So got all of it.
That's an interesting idea. I think he'd kill it, to be honest with you. I mean,
Yeah.
most athletes tend to do so. I mean, didn't Warren Sapp win it at one point? Like, I mean, that's big, old, hefty Warren Sapp. I mean, Victor
Yeah.
Oladipo, knee injuries notwithstanding, even quad injury notwithstanding, I'm sure he could go out there and crush it. So, yeah, interesting. Let's hear from all of you. What do you think his best summer job would be? Because I think there's lots of interesting options out there. But we'll move on. We'll talk a little bit about Omer Yurtseven, the big question, the big Turk. Everybody at Turk Nowitzki, etc. A lot of people interested in what his impact would be next season and beyond. So we'll talk about that in the next segment. But before we do that, do you know why free trials renew without your consent? Because it's a scam out to get you. Greedy corporations will pocket your money, so you don't want that. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. It's a new app that helps you, identify and stop paying for the subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. Everybody does it. You sign up for something, you get a free trial week or period or something like that. Next thing you know, you've been on the hook for a couple months. You're going, why do I keep spending money on something I don't even use? Well, Truebill will solve that for you. People save up to $720 a year with Truebill. That's great pocket money right there. Companies make subscriptions hard to handle or cancel, and Truebill makes it incredibly simple. So just link your accounts, and Truebill will cancel your unwarranted subscriptions in just one tap. Truebill has over 2 million users and it's helped save them over $100 million. You could be next. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now to truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. The Ultimate NBA Mock Draft starts on June 16th. The network is all into it. 50 insiders. Nothing equals the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft on Locked On. Locked On Draft Expert, plus the Odyssey insiders. Everybody there to give you information you need about the upcoming draft. The first pick is June 16th. So search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and follow now so you don't miss a pick. Of course, here we are wrapping up our exit interview series before we start leaning into the draft. I'm already excited. Not a draft guy myself, but really looking forward to the upcoming analysis, not just about Miami's whole thought process, what they're doing regarding the draft, but also looking at some of the players, because Miami may trade the pick, they may keep the pick, and they could certainly use some depth, especially this past season. That was proven that Miami can take these players, find them, develop them, carve out a role, and help them develop. And no player probably embodies that more than Omer Yurtseven. Of course, he was a late season addition last year. He wound up coming on the team and then wound up earning a 2-year deal with the team. Playing occasional minutes here and there. He wound up getting some more opportunity once Bam Adebayo got hurt, and then eventually Dewayne Dedmon got hurt, and he wound up starting through several games in December. Wound up, of course, playing more significantly during that time, and he recorded 14 straight double-digit rebounding games, and everybody's thinking, this is it. This is the key to our rebounding problems. He has a nice touch around the basket. He has a slight jumper as well. His offense needs a little bit more polish, but overall he was making an impact. And then once Bam came back, well, Yurtseven was basically out of the rotation from that point forward. I don't think he played significant minutes at all during the postseason, and yet everybody was kind of confused. A large swath of Heat fans going, he's a 7-footer, a legit 7-footer. Why isn't he playing out there? So there's a lot to read into what we saw from Yurtseven during the regular season, but I think a lot of people are also taking it somewhat in the wrong direction. They're leaning too much into what they saw from Yurt during these regular season games and expecting him to be a huge impact player moving forward. What were your overall takeaways from Yurtseven's season?
Yeah, he's not a starter yet. Despite that swath of Heat fans that you're talking about, there's definitely a group that says, you should be starting Omer Yurtseven and Bam Adebayo in the front court. There's some media members who think that that's probably the future of Miami's front court as well, and I don't know that I'm there yet. I'm a big fan of Omer Yurtseven's game. I've loved everything I've seen from him basically since the summer league. There's definitely promise there as a 3-point shooter. He has touch outside the arc. He's a really good rebounder. Obviously, the size is really impressive, but he is a ways away. He's a ways away. Like, this is not somebody that you could put out there in every single matchup, right? Like, he's going to basically play drop defense against everybody because he doesn't really have the quick feet yet. We heard Pat Riley talk about it in his end of season press conference. So that's not me. If you don't believe me, maybe you might believe Pat Riley when we say this. Like, there's a lot of promise there, but there's still things that he needs to work on, specifically defensively. He also needs to learn how to read the game better, make quicker decisions offensively. Like, he is a little one-dimensional on that end. People might be saying, one-dimensional? What do you mean? He could shoot the three and he could score inside. That doesn't mean anything to me. Can he pass the ball? Can he play make? Can he make quick decisions on that end as well? Can he roll? Can he be a factor in the short roll and kicking out the shooters that the Heat say that they have so many of? Those to me are my questions. That's not a criticism of Omer Yurtseven, not at all. No. He's young. He just played his first NBA season. He was a rookie, and a really impressive one at that, especially one that you got undrafted. But that said, there's still a ways to go in his development. And when we're talking about his ability to be a night-to-night rotation player, David, I think he's probably a couple of years away. Not one off season, not one season. I think he's probably a couple of years away. And that kind of leads me to my biggest question. Do the Heat think he's ready to be the backup center in full? Because Dewayne Dedmon's contract is up. He's a free agent. He's getting older. We saw him break down in the playoffs and be out of the rotation by the time midway through the Eastern Conference Finals. Do they think that Omer Yurtseven is ready to take on that kind of role on a team that still wants to win a championship next year?
To answer that question, and I can't say for precisely how they view him, I think there are expectations that he can play that role, but I don't think they think he's ready yet. I think they could probably find somebody of equal or greater value. And look, that's tough for me to say, because my big question was, is he actually a bad or good player? And we've been challenged on this before, and I forget exactly where it was, whether it was a YouTube comment or an email or something along those lines. But somebody asked us, is he actually, a bad player? Is he not capable of being a player or a starter or a rotation level player? Because are we just buying into the party line from the team and that he's not ready? Because we see the result. He's not getting any minutes. And then our feeling is, well, he's not ready. He's obviously not playing. We trust Eric Spoelstra to be able to handle these minutes before. But we've also seen mistakes in the past, either a player getting too much playing time or other players not getting enough and then all of a sudden being inserted into the lineup and thriving. And there's enough evidence from this past season that maybe Yurtseven can thrive. Like, yes, there are issues defensively. Yes, they have to change their scheme, and maybe those are the bigger problems there. But is he actually as bad as we make him seem, or is he actually better? Because there's this, again, there's that weird contingency, not weird, a strong contingency, a very vocal minority that believe that Yurtseven is the savior, that he's going to be the person who can impact his team, free Bam to do much more, and maybe go back to a more traditional style of play, which is something that Heat fans have always very strangely gravitated towards, like this idea that we needed a big center during the Big Three era, that even when they were going small with Chris Bosh, that
it's why
wasn't
all South Florida fell in love with Hassan Whiteside, right? Despite the fact that Whiteside had obvious drawbacks, and by the way, the Heat
another
did
free
as
agent.
well. But I'll just go back to this. I don't know if Omer Yurtseven is destined to be an NBA starter or not. I'm just telling you what I see right now. That's all I'm saying. And this isn't the Houston Rockets that can just let Alperen Sengun go out there and run 15 post-ups every night, right? Because they have no aspirations of winning any games. In fact, they were trying to lose games so that they can get more good players, high draft picks next to Jalen Green and Sengun. So with the Heat, they want to get to the playoffs. They recognize that it's not just about getting the playoffs, right? It's not the Big Three era where it's like, hey, let's just get in and figure it out. We probably need a higher seed to have home court advantage over some of these more talented teams in the Eastern Conference. And then win the Eastern Conference is the next part of that process. I don't know. I don't know where Yurtseven is. But you could challenge us about, hey, do the Heat have the wrong read on this? Do you guys have the wrong read on this? All I know is that all 30 NBA teams decided that they didn't want to draft Omer Yurtseven. So it's not just us, and it's not just the Heat front office. It's all the NBA teams decided, you know what? Coming out of Georgetown, nobody's drafting this guy. Okay. Right. So we could take that at face value for what it is. Omer Yurtseven also put the work in. He had a really nice summer league. He had a really nice year for the Heat. I think he's a really good fit for the Heat's culture, and I think the Heat have done a lot by Omer Yurtseven. To the question of whether or not he's bad or good, I think he's good. I think he's really talented. I just don't think he's ready to step into that kind of role now, but he could be. And so my expectation this offseason is that they'll probably let Dedmon walk. They'll obviously have Bam and Omer Yurtseven, but I think they'll add another center to that mix, maybe a more veteran center, possibly somebody younger with more upside in the draft, right, in the first round. Somebody that's a little bit more versatile, where Yurtseven's sort of that drop-back style 7-footer. Do they try to maybe get another versatile type of center who could play a few different styles to just kind of add to that bullpen of centers that now you have with the extremely versatile Bam, the extremely traditional and large Yurtseven? Maybe you add somebody that's sort of a tweener in the middle of those guys. I could see that as a potential option. Yurtseven, I expect to be on the roster. And it'll be up to him in training camp, and he'll have his chances. I don't expect him, and I don't think the Heat have the expectations of him being a starter or a high usage rotation player right away.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that assessment. I also think they want him to succeed. Miami, to your point about Oladipo, they don't typically invest that kind of time, money, resources, et cetera, in developing a player, putting them in the opportunity to succeed, and then just kind of saying, all right, well, you did what you did. We're not going to let you walk now. So they want him to take that next level. And they are a believer, as always, that you can accomplish your goals through hard work, through dedication, and taking your abilities to another level. So they're going to do what they can to get the most out of Yurtseven. We'll see how he responds next season. It's going to be an interesting question there. I'd agree. I think he's a rotation player. I think he's a good backup. I think that's probably his ceiling right now, is to be a very good backup. And you know what? That's fine. Like, you've got an all-star, all-NBA defender in Bam Adebayo at your starter. And I know there's this weird push to make him the 4, to have him stretch the floor, Wes. But aside from that, he's a very functional player as is, and I don't think he's the problem. Like, that wasn't the issue against the Boston Celtics. That even wasn't the issue against Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. There were other things going on there. And I don't think Yurtseven necessarily solves them all either.
Right.
Let's move on. Put a bow on this. What's your summer job for Omer Yurtseven?
I've got him. It's not necessarily a job, but I'm going to enroll him in tennis camp.
Nice.
Tennis
Get
camp.
His footwork, huh?
Yep. Increase the footwork and the side-to-side movements in particular. Some agility drills, things like that. I've got him in tennis camp.
All right. I don't want to say he's soft or anything like that, but I think he could use some toughening up. And for that reason alone, I have him as a summer intern over at the Udonis Haslem Foundation. I think it could be an opportunity for him to learn from the OG, take his skills to the next level, and kind of learn what it takes to be the Udonis Haslem. That's it. Basically, a guy who carved out his career as another undrafted player. Like, it's just amazing that these stories keep recurring within the Heat organization. But there's a big reason for it, because they want those guys to come in hungry, determined, and we'll see if Yurtseven can develop the mental fortitude to be able to take on another role next season, a bigger role next season. But anyway, we'll move on, and we will talk about Dewayne Dedmon, as you hinted, a free agent, an older player. Can he continue to be a part of the Heat rotation moving forward? And we'll quickly touch on Markieff Morris. Morris's unfortunately injury-marred season as well, so stay tuned for that. But before we go on, I just want to tell you about BetOnline, the number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including, of course, the NBA Finals, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the Stanley Cup, right? Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Just a reminder, as always, that you can reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLHeat. If you ever want to send in a question, you can always shoot a DM. We're always open. We love getting feedback. Leave comments on our YouTube videos. And, of course, make sure to please subscribe. As I mentioned before, we'll be covering the draft in great detail, our Blue Notebooks, in-depth scouting reports on some of the players that have been linked to Miami already, a couple of which Miami have brought in for workouts, so you all stay tuned for that. And, of course, we're going to be talking about free agency, potential trades, and much, much more during the offseason. You'll get no better coverage than what we provide about the Miami Heat. So make sure to subscribe on all available platforms. Here we are wrapping up our exit interview series, and one player that we want to talk about, Dewayne Dedmon. What to make of Dwayne? He played a significant role as Bam Adebayo's backup, had some good burst every once in a while, a nice spark off the bench. His second season with Miami after they added him last year. He seems he could be a productive player, an active rebounder. Again, another traditional 7-footer, but one that can also stretch the floor as well. There were obvious limitations to his game. He's a little bit older. He was injured at times. And during the playoffs, he basically fell out of the rotation. There were moments there against the Celtics in particular when he would have maybe 3 or 4 minutes per game. And those were basically just times to pick up fouls.
Yeah.
Like, that was basically all he was doing out there. So it's hard to kind of take away exactly what to make of Dewayne Dedmon. Was it injury? Was it age? Was it a combination of those things? Can he bounce back? Can he become a productive player? Or is it time to give somebody like Omer Yurtseven, another free agent, or perhaps somebody even in the draft, an opportunity to become Bam's backup center? What do you think? What are your takeaways from Dwayne's season?
Yeah, solid regular season as a backup, but he was clearly limited. He's 32 years old. All the things that you talk about that kind of cropped up as the postseason went along, the foul tendencies, the injury concerns, the age. These are the reasons why Dedmon was basically out of the league until Miami picked him up a couple years ago. He does have a tendency to foul over his entire career. He has a tendency to get hurt throughout his whole career, and he was an aging center. It worked out in Miami. My big question for those 2 years, is whether or not they think he's worth bringing back on a minimum contract, because that's probably what he's going to be looking at this summer. It wouldn't shock me if he was out of the league again, just based on the fact that he already was before the Heat. Like, I don't know what of the 29 other teams, which ones were interested in Dewayne Dedmon, because it didn't seem like any of them were before Miami was. It'll be interesting to see if the Heat sort of helped rehabilitate his reputation and maybe get a job elsewhere. I could see that. He's a great locker room presence. People really like him. He's good at what he does, even if it's limited. But again, I'll just ask, like, depending on what you think of Yurtseven, depending on what you think about this draft and the other options, is it worth for the Heat to bring Dewayne Dedmon back on the minimum? I could see Dedmon's free agency taking a while here as he sort of sifts out his options, whatever they may be, and as the Heat sort out their options, because they're going to be looking, I think, at a lot of different places, because when it got down to it, he was out of the rotation, Dedmon was, and you were basically left with just Bam Adebayo and PJ Tucker in your front court. And do you look to add a third big to that group who can play alongside PJ, but can maybe also play alongside Bam?
Right.
And maybe now you have 3 workable options in that front court as opposed to 2, because we saw the limitations of that. in the Eastern Conference Finals. So I wonder, and Dedmon obviously didn't fit what it was that the Heat needed in terms of versatility. So I could see this taking a little bit of a while for Dedmon, but at the end of the day, maybe they still bring him back at a minimum deal, depending on how much roster space they have.
That's a really good call. Like, we've seen this time and time again from teams, is that you can afford to wait on a player like Dewayne Dedmon, just because, as you said, there was a time there when he was a free agent in the middle of the season when a lot of players were dealing with the shortened COVID impacts and things of that sort, and they could have used a quality backup, and nobody was calling. And yes, there was concerns about his injury. He had been rehabbing. There were also concerns about off the court, personality things. Those were overlooked. He wound up, as you said, becoming a great role player here in Miami. Maybe that reputation has been salvaged, but either way, he functioned in Miami, as we've seen so often. A lot of players function in Miami. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to function elsewhere. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of suitors for his services one way or the other. He is, at this point in his career, a roster filler. And that's a cold assessment, but it's also an accurate one. You're going to bring him in because you need a big, because somebody gets hurt, because you don't have any other options, because all the other names that you wanted to take were off the board, et cetera. And unfortunately, I think that's where Dewayne is mostly going to be for this Heat roster. That's my question, too, is can he be replaced? And there are a number of other quote-unquote serviceable bigs that could probably provide what he does, maybe something different, maybe even something better. And that being the case, is it really worth bringing back Dedmon? Like, as fans of the team, you develop a connection to these players. You love seeing him thrive here. Of course, shout out to the Miami Heat beat crew for giving him the mechanic nickname, etc. That's taken off. It's now the official nickname, and he certainly bought into it. He seems like a good personality guy. At the same time, it's like you can't fix what the mechanic doesn't do, and that's what he is right now. He's not a great player at this stage in his career, and I think the Heat will probably look around.
They'll look in other ways. Yeah, they're going to. Yeah.
And if they can find somebody else, they'll bring him. And that's it. Unfortunately, Dwayne's tenure with the Heat will come to an end.
Probably. It's a less than 10% chance that he comes back at this point. Yeah. Probably.
I mean, you've got Ure on the roster. He's cheaper. He's younger. And basically, he stretches the floor. And he's not that much less mobile than Dewayne Dedmon.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, though Dedmon is probably looking at minimum deals because he has so much years of NBA service, his minimum is way higher, in relative terms, than one for Yurtseven, who's just completed his first year. Summer job, I have him as a school principal. He likes kids. He kind of has that like old grizzled kind of look to him, where like if you got called into Principal Dedmon's office, you knew you were going to be in trouble. So I have him as a school principal.
I could see that really, really old school. Kind of like Morgan Freeman, and what was that movie a long, long time ago? Lean on Me, based on like a true story where he was like a hard-nosed principal that takes no prisoners, but you can tell he really cares. That's the way.
Yeah, he's got a sensitive side for sure. Yeah,
absolutely, and he grew up on those same streets, so he can reach out to those kids. He knows what they're going through. Absolutely, I love it. Good call. You can learn a lot from Dewayne Dedmon, school principal. Let's touch on Markieff Morris's brief time in Miami, because of course there was the game against Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets where he gets hurt. He suffers from whiplash. We had a doctor on to talk about the long-term repercussions of that injury. And then when it looked like Markieff may or may not have been healthy, well, the Heat still kept him out. They weren't making him an active participant. He was there for warm-ups. He was there for practices, but it was very limited contact. And then eventually he gets back on the roster, has a couple big moments. I remember one game in particular where he just returned to the lineup and he's hitting like 18, 15-footers. And it's like, well, this is a guy who can stretch the floor a lot better than Bam Adebayo can, or a lot more consistently anyway. And those were just in limited minutes. And then all of a sudden we saw him kind of fall off the face of the earth. And I don't think he played a single minute at any point in time during the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. So
nothing major. He had a couple spot minutes here and there, but
Yeah. So, I mean, what to make of Markieff Morris? You and I were talking beforehand. I think he's another player that I think he's done with the Heat organization, not just vice versa. Like, I'm sure they would love to bring back another veteran with championship experience, but this seems like a pretty unfulfilling year for Markieff.
Yep.
What was your big takeaway from his whole season?
It was a season that never started for him, right? Like we never really we had such high hopes for Markieff Morris. When the Heat made their big offseason moves, it was Kyle Lowry, PJ Tucker, and Markieff Morris, right? It's like, okay, the power forward position after Jay Crowder left was just completely void. You're trying like weird options like Trevor Ariza there for a year, and it just like not really actual guys at that spot. You're playing a lot of guys out of position, and then you go out and you get two bona fide power forwards. You get PJ Tucker and Markieff Morris, and that was going to be the rotation at that position. And that was the Heat's plan going into the season. We saw that early on in the season. PJ Tucker was off the floor. A lot of times it was Markieff Morris on the floor. And then there was other options with that too, where maybe Markieff could play some backup five for you, right? We saw when he did come back, Eric Spoelstra talking about how he could do a lot of things that Bam can do as far as the functionality on offense, the passing, the screening, all the stuff from the triple threat position at the top of the nail there. So, but we never really saw any of that, and so it was a lot of sort of what if with Markieff Morris. You wonder, had he been healthy, could he have been more of a factor in the Eastern Conference Finals if he had been healthy all season long and could have carved out a role in the rotation? Right. You just wonder what this season could have been. I think it's fair to say this was the worst case scenario for Markieff Morris's season. Like that was like getting shoved in the back by Nikola Jokic and not coming back for several months. That was the worst, and never being able to get a defined role was literally the worst case scenario for his season. He's going to walk in free agency. He'll find somewhere else maybe, and that'll be it. And we'll never really know how the fit could have worked out.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's why my only question was, who's he playing for next year, by the way?
Yeah, he's basically 33 years old right now. My feeling is that if he could, he'd probably try to play alongside his twin brother, who's currently a member of the Los Angeles Clippers, the LA Clippers, excuse me. If they've got a opportunity for him there, I wonder whether or not they might explore an opportunity to bring in the other Morris brother and give him some playing time too. I don't know what their ceiling will be next year. They're probably going to be competing for a championship if they get the return of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George back to full strength. So maybe that's an opportunity. But you're right. It's a very, very slim chance that he'll return to Miami for a number of reasons. So you wish Markieff all the best. Oh, I'm sorry. What's your summer job? Yeah.
Karate instructor. I don't know why. He just kind of looks like one.
I've got him as a 70s bar bouncer. Like he's just got that look to me.
Yep.
Like if he could extend the hair out just slightly, basically. But very, very, very much a bouncer type. Okay. And I'm sure between him and his brother, I mean, nobody's getting into that club without their permission. Unless Jokic brings his brothers, of course. I don't want to escalate that fight any, but we had plenty of problems from a large number of fans for a long time. Yeah, half of Europe hates us, but the other half loves us, and that's all that matters. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen. I hope that you've enjoyed the exit interview series. Make sure to go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and the author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, Leif Thulin, and giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft, mock draft player rankings, and of course, Big Boards. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.